So you guys saw the title of the video. Let's get into what I would fill a 10-car garage with and why. Now what you're seeing in the background is Forza Horizon 5, and I've currently built the car I'm driving around to most closely resemble my actual car, which is my first and absolute dream car, a second generation Camaro. I am fortunate enough to already own one because me and my dad built one as a father-son project car. We each put about $5,000 into the car, including the cost of the car, and it will be mine as soon as I graduate college. So I already have my first dream car. However, I do want to build it. Here's some current pictures of it. What you're seeing now is what is hopefully similar to the end result of the build. For the drivetrain, I've already bought myself a Gen 6 454 Chevy motor, which I plan on turning into a 496. For the non-Americans, that's 8.1 liters. It should be making around 650 horsepower naturally aspirated, and that's going to be sent to the rear wheels through a T56 Magnum transmission and either a Ford 9-inch rear end or a GM 12-bolt rear end. And then for the suspension, I'm going to be upgrading to coilovers all around, and then just general upgrades like harder bushings and that sort of stuff, a more stout sway bar, and just general suspension upgrades, but keeping it more stock-ish. For appearance, I either want to do a gloss or satin black with a gloss yellow stripe, a chrome delete, yellow engine, yellow brake calipers, black 5-spoke wheels, interior stock apart from the steering wheel and the seats, maybe a roll cage. And then the biggest thing aesthetically is I'm going to be converting the late generation into the early generation. To do this, you switch the front fenders and bumper, and then the rear has to be cut. Basically, the whole rear end has to be cut off to transplant the earlier 70s rear end on there. My overall look was inspired by the Transformers 4 1969 Bumblebee Camaro. This build is probably going to end up costing $30,000 to $75,000 when all is said and done, and it will have a 5.4 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. After depreciation hits for around $50,000, I think I should be able to buy a 6th generation Camaro ZL1. I would like to get it in this blue in the 10-speed automatic trim with the updated rear end, which you just have to change the lights and bumper to update to the new one. I'll put a picture of that in a minute. As far as mods go, I would probably leave it stock, possibly full bolt-ons and a tune, shooting for like 750 horsepower, around that range. And that would give it a 5.3 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. The only cosmetic mod I think I would do is upgrade to the 5th generation Z28 wheels. But apart from that, I think it's perfect as it is. Now, the reason I want one of these is because my dad had a 2017 Camaro SS, and I absolutely love the car. Not only that, I love how aggressive it looks, and the fact that it could be daily driven in stock form with 650 horsepower and a supercharged V8 under the hood. Here's the updated rear end. Now, the third car would be a dedicated drag car in the form of a Honda Insight first generation. A little background. The Honda Insight was one of the first hybrids, if not the first hybrid, that Honda made. And stock, it came with, I believe, around 70 horsepower combined between a 3-cylinder and an electric motor. They are all aluminum and weigh about 1,600 pounds stock. Not only that, they have great aerodynamics to get insane fuel mileage. This build would be kept as stock looking as possible on the outside, but underneath I would want to do a K24 turbo swap, making around 500 horsepower with a 5 or 6 speed manual transmission. This gives it the best power to weight ratio of any car on this list, with 3.4 pounds per horsepower. And I think I could do this build for around $15,000 all in, because the cars are normally between $2,000 and $5,000, and then the other stuff is around $10,000. Another fact, these cars are pretty rare, with only 20,000 of them being made. The reason I would want this car is because I think they look hilarious, and they're also extremely slow from the factory. And I think not only is it a perfect drag car platform because it's so light, but I just think it would be funny to have something that stupid looking be that fast. There is a video of a K24 swapped Insight making 500 horsepower on YouTube that ran, I believe, a 10.1 quarter mile, so they can be done pretty well if you know what you're doing. And I actually found the Insight from that video for sale on Facebook Marketplace for $12,500. If I had the money, I would go buy it right now. But I'm trying to pay off some college debt. Now, I want to preface this fourth car by saying that if I were to just own these first 4 cars in the entire rest of my life, I would be perfectly content. But after this, the rest are kind of like, yeah, I would like to own them, but it's not something I have to do before I die. Now, this car is a Lotus Exige Sport 350 or Series 3. It has a supercharged Toyota V6 from the Camry, and I would probably keep it stock, maybe full bolt-ons and a tune with a goal of 450 horsepower. This would give it a 5.8 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. I think I could get this car for $60,000 imported to the USA. And the reason that I want this car is, as a kid, I used to have a Lotus Exige Series 2 Matchbox car, and that was my favorite car. And then I got to see and sit in a Lotus Elise Series 2, and I fell in love with the Lotus brand. Unfortunately, this car never came to the US, meaning that I'll have to wait, I believe, another 17 years to import one. But I'm willing to wait. I think this car is absolutely beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful supercars ever made, in my opinion. Not only that, it'll be reliable because it is a Toyota V6 at the end of the day. And because it's a Lotus, it should handle extremely well. Once again, I've never driven one. I've never even seen one in real life. However, I do plan on maybe in a few years going to Europe and renting one just to see what it's like. If I can't find it in the British Racing Green, I'm going to try to find this spec. So the fifth car I would like to own is a rotary swapped Miata build, making around 400 horsepower. This would give it a 6 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. And it would be a 3-rotor swap. And the reason I want this is strictly because of the sound. I mean, rotary's absolutely crazy sounding. There's a RX-7 drag car at my local drag strip with a rotary in it, and it is just an absolute eargasm. You don't see rotaries around a lot, but when they're built right, they are good engines. And I think I could do this build for around $20,000 all in. Now, the reason I pick a Miata is because it would be a cheap base. Otherwise, I would have just said an FDRX7. But I think by the time I get there, an FDRX7 will be way more expensive than $20,000. I mean, they already are. They're already past 40s into like the 60s right now. But I believe they're going to just keep going up. So they're just going to become unobtainium. And you kind of have to do a swap if you want a rotary. And then I also thought of the Miata because it was lightweight and you would be putting a Mazda rotary in a Mazda car. Now, I know the Clip is an F-150, but the next car would be a Toyota Tacoma Pre-Runner with a 2JZ swap. And this would probably be making around 600 horsepower and around 4,500 pounds. So it would give it a 7.5 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. I think I could make this build happen for around $60K. And I think this is just a really cool build. I never really liked trucks until I saw a Toyota Tacoma Pre-Runner at my local car meet. And as soon as I saw that, I instantly fell in love. And I was like, I need to build one of those in my life. I think it would be extremely fun, even though there's not a lot of off-roading spots near me in New Jersey. I think it would be an absolute blast to drive around, even on the street, in a pre-runner truck. And for those that don't know, a pre-runner is similar to a trophy truck, just kind of dumbed down a little bit. Now, the next car on the list, the seventh car, would be the McLaren 720S or 765LT. And I would be keeping this stock or with the tune and exhaust in this orange like you see. My goal would be 800 horsepower, which would give it a 4 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. And looking at past mass-produced McLarens like the MP4-12C, I think it would hover around $100,000 or $150,000 after depreciation. And I would probably prefer the Spider version, but that would be more expensive. I am trying to keep this list somewhat realistic. For example, if I were to sell 4 cars, I could maybe buy the McLaren later in life and just keep like a cheap, reliable daily in case the McLaren broke. Now, the reason I like this McLaren is because it's a twin-turbo V8. And not only that, the 720S, I think, is one of the most elegant supercars ever made. It somehow is aggressive-looking and absolutely gorgeous with very nice, smooth, flowing lines at the same time. Not only that, in the form of the 765LT, it is one of the fastest production cars down the drag strip, which just kind of shows how nuts it is. And that is their track-focused model. I just overall think this is probably one of the best mid-engine supercars in the $300,000 range that you could buy right now. Now, the next car, you may have seen it pop up, is the Aston Martin V8 Vantage, which uses a Mercedes V8. I believe it's a turbo. That's normally used in some of the AMG cars. I believe it has around 500 horsepower stock. I would be shooting for 550. That would give it a 6.2 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. I think after depreciation, looking at the other V8 Vantages, this could be had for between $60,000 and $80,000. However, I do really like the V12 Vantage. They're only making 333 of them, though, so I believe they're going to go up way high in value after they're made. And also, they start at $450,000, so I think there's no way I'm ever going to get one of them. But I'll put a picture in there anyway. This is, once again, I think one of the most elegant cars ever made. I love the design cues of Aston Martin. They almost never miss with their cars. And between the V8, the AMG V8, that sounds amazing, and the design of the car paired with the nice interior, I just like it. Here are some pictures of the V12 Vantage. The ninth car is a Ferrari 488 GTB, which I would keep stock with a 4.5 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. I think this is going to hover around $100,000 to $150,000, looking at past Ferraris that are similar, such as the 458. If possible, I would go for the 488 Pista, but that is also way more expensive, just like the last two cars on the list. It's a higher trim level, it's better performing, but it's just way out of sight for, what I think I'll be able to achieve in life. As for why I want this, there's got to be a reason Ferrari thinks they're so good, so you might as well find out why by owning one of their cars. I think their engines sound great, and I'm sure they handle great. And I think Ferrari is probably one of the only cars that I would ever consider getting in red. I don't know why. Something about red cars I just don't like. I think the shape of the taillights kind of meshes with the color of the car, and that kind of throws off the entire body line. But yeah, I just think that this would be like a decent Ferrari to get as your first Ferrari. And I don't think this one will gain any value in the future due to the fact that there's many different models that are way nicer than it. And it's not anything special, such as the 458 Italia, which was the last naturally aspirated Ferrari. Now, for the last garage spot, the 10th spot, it would actually be 3 bikes taking up the spot of a car. The first bike would be the KTM 1290 Super Duke R with 180 horsepower. This gives it a 2.4 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. And I like this due to the V-twin engine, which is very uncommon in bikes with this high horsepower. And the fact that it's a naked bike, the riding position makes it pretty comfortable to sit on and be on for long periods of time. Now the second bike would be a KTM 450 SXF, which has 55 horsepower, giving it a 4.3 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. I think both this and the 1290 could be had for $5,000 each after depreciation. And the reason I would like this is because I grew up racing motocross up until I was around 15, 16. And I'm really missing it. If I were to go back, I would go back on a 450. And I always liked my KTMs. So that's why I would go with the KTM 450. Now the last bike on the list is the Ducati Panigale V4 with 225 horsepower. It has the best power to weight ratio out of all the vehicles on the list with a 1.6 pound per horsepower power to weight ratio. After depreciation, I think this could be had for $10,000. And the reason I want this is because I currently have a Ducati Scrambler, which I absolutely love the characteristics of the engine, the sound, the handling. And also, I think the Ducati Panigale is probably the best looking superbike on the market currently. But yeah, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed, please leave a like, and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.